Today, let's do something crazy. Let's put 50 different watch micro brands head to head. Today, I'll be brutally ranking some of the most popular independent watch brands. From Brew to San Martin, Furlan Mari to Studio Underdog, Pagani Design to Baltic. Today's video is going to be a little bit controversial, and that's not because I'm going to try and make it that way, but naturally a lot of people will disagree with the opinions that I have, and that's absolutely fine. My opinion is not final. Yours matters just as much, if not even more. So feel free to share your thoughts on each of these watch brands as the video progresses in the comment section. We'll be ranking these 50 micro brands throughout 5 different tiers. The bottom tier is called Not For Me. They're either bad value for money or just have butt ugly watches. The next tier is Missing Something. These aren't bad brands, but maybe slightly overpriced or lacking an identity. Next is Decent Watches. This tier is for brands that are simply solid. The second best tier is Can't Go Wrong. I think that if you buy any watch from these brands, you will not be disappointed. Finally, the top tier is Must Try, and you'll likely only find a couple of brands in this category at the end of the video, so stay tuned to see who makes it. If you want to see me do another tier list with 100 of the world's best watch brands on one tier list, then get this video to 1,000 likes and I'll make it. So kicking this tier list off, we have Brew Watch Company. Obviously, they have a very distinctive design language. They've got that sort of steampunky, futuristic, but retro look going on all at the same time. Quite sporty with their watches, good use of colours, but of course the gimmick is that they're great for timing the perfect shot of espresso. That's the thing. It's going to be very hard to grow past it. And I am excited to see how they do that, because they can't live off this sort of espresso gimmick for the next 20-30 years. That's just not going to work. So I'm excited to see, do they do a dive watch? Do they do a field watch? What does that look like? I still do think they're beautiful watches, and they are great value for money too. I mean, the prices are very fair for the spec sheets on offer. Not a hater of Brew at all. I think they make some great watches, and I actually think it's going to be the first brand in Can't Go Wrong. Next up, we have San Martin. Now, anybody that's been watching the channel for a long time will know that I'm not really a fan of these AliExpress brands. Listen, it's undeniable the value for money that you get with these sort of watch brands. And San Martin, I would say, is probably the most popular in terms of delivering the best spec and the highest quality for the money. Now, I'm fully aware that for $200-ish, you're probably going to get one of the best watches from San Martin across the whole affordable watch market. But of course, that does come with a massive slice of unoriginality. I love their original design GMT. That's a fantastic watch. I also love their Aquanaut-inspired Pilot's watch that they released recently, another original design. But with 99% of their catalogue just being clomages, just being copies of other models. Well, for me, San Martin has to go in the Missing Something category, simply because they are missing originality, and that matters to me. The quality is there. Great watches, by the way, but missing originality. Next up, we have Boulder Supply Company. Now, Boulder is one of the first micro brands that I actually personally considered picking up for my collection. Boulder, for me, in my opinion, offers some of the best value chronographs that you'll find on the whole market. Their chronographs come in with full titanium construction, sapphire crystals, 200 meters of water resistance, and they very much do have original designs. You won't find other watches, not that I can think of anyway, that look the same. I like the designs, I like the sizes of the watches, I like the prices of the watches. For me, you cannot go wrong with a Boulder. It's a can't go wrong. You buy one, you're going to be good. Next up, we have Furlan Mari. Right, so this one's going to be a little bit controversial because I know this is a very popular brand. And Furlan Mari rose to fame very quickly, and sort of the hype built up sort of overnight with this brand, but I don't think they've done much with it. Obviously, they had their Mecha Quartz, and then I think they released like an automatic dress piece that was very similar to the Mecha Quartz first release. I don't really think they've done much since then. At least I haven't seen it. I think they're probably a little bit too overpriced for me. I think they're decent watches. I couldn't put them any higher, and I can't say they're missing something because they're doing everything right, but they just don't have enough. They're not releasing enough. I definitely want to see more from Furlan Mari. Release some more watches, please. Okay, next up we have Main. I think it's Main. Generally speaking, I think these guys do make some really high quality watches. The Main Manhattan is one of my favorite affordable watches, like full stop. It's an absolutely beautiful watch with a beautiful dial. It is a little bit pricey. I think it could do with being a little bit cheaper, but I think you do get a Swiss Elite movement in there, which does make the watch a lot better value. Again, though, that is a homage, and some of their catalogue is homage watches, which is okay, and they still have enough originality for it to be cool. But I don't think I can put Main in Can't Go Wrong just decent watches. I need to look into them a bit more and have a bit more experience with them before I can put them any higher. Okay, next up we have Seeger Design. This is going to be a funny one. I know a lot of people like Seeger Design, and I actually quite like them too. They've got a lot of cool looking watches. And I also think spec for the money's there. Like, they're good value watches. They do one that looks like an Apple Watch that has a mechanical movement. It's all glass. And that watch is only like $130. Like, that's really good value for what's on offer there. But for whatever reason, like, the brand ethos, like the story behind the brand, just, it isn't landing with people. It isn't landing with enthusiasts. But I don't know whether it's the marketing, it's not quite landing properly. Maybe it's the brand name, Seeger Design. It's not a great name. But just when you compare it with other brands on this list, they are just missing something, aren't they? I don't know what it is, but they are just missing something. Next up, we have British Microbrand Isotope. Now, I've handled a lot of Isotope models. I even own an Isotope model now. The fit and the finish is just awesome on these watches. But for me, it's the designs. The designs are so beautiful. They do this bronze brown, like military-inspired piece that is just unbelievably sexy. I do think there are watches that are a difficult price point where they're competing with like Nomos and Oris, where it does take some careful consideration to pick one of these up. Now, of course, they are using Swiss movements inside, which is why they are a bit more expensive than some of these other micro brands who are using Seiko and Miyota. I think if you're willing to spend $1,000 on an Isotope, you can't go wrong. Like, you're obviously going to take that in consideration when buying the watch, if you can afford it or not. If you can, you can't go wrong. It's simple. Next up, we have Dan Henry, and spoiler alert, this is one of my favorite micro brands. For me, Dan Henry watches are just so bloody sexy. Their chronographs are just so good looking. The Pilot World War II one I think of first is just, oh my god, such a good looking watch. But then their racing chronographs, which are like Speedmaster and Daytona inspired, and then you've got some of their watches that are inspired by like vintage Hoya, vintage Breitlings, just super cool chronographs. And again, value for money is definitely there. These are like $250, some of the most affordable watches on this whole video. You can't go wrong with a Dan Henry. It's as simple as that. You cannot go wrong. I would recommend a Dan Henry to anybody. If you're a new collector or an experienced collector, there's fun to be had in a Dan Henry watch. That's a fact. Okay, next up we have Nodus. Now, I'll be honest, this isn't a brand that I've had too much experience with in the past. Now, I have obviously watched some reviews of Nodus watches before from some of my fellow reviewers, and I know that they do have a good reputation in the enthusiast community. My favorite watch that they make is the GMT. Like, this thing is just so good looking. Now, I won't lie to you, they haven't caught my attention enough for me to personally consider getting one in my collection. Aside from that GMT, I've not really like fallen in love with one. So for me, in terms of the tier list, I can't possibly put them in can't go wrong because I've never really considered picking one up myself. But they do look like super decent watches. I don't think the brand is missing anything, so they're gonna go into decent watches. Next up, we have Baltic, another Chinese watch brand. Now, I must admit, I do have a little bit of a soft spot for Baltic because they do make one of my favorite affordable watches on the planet. Baltic make this bronze bezel dive style watch that is just so bloody good looking. Bronze bezels, steel studs, it's like vintage Rolex, vintage Tudor. It's just such a beautiful watch. When you consider the Sapphire NH38, it's like $180 or something. I mean, it's so, like, such a bargain. Now, Baltic do, of course, do quite a lot of homage watches as well, but they tend to homage, like, super vintage watches, like, from the war. They certainly don't homage any modern watches as far as I can think of. I wouldn't say you can't go wrong with them because they're not perfect, but for the $200 and less that you can pick these Baltic watches up for, they are super decent watches. Next up, we have Atowak, and these guys specialize in making like super cool hyper watches. I've reviewed the Attore Lights, which was like a silver racing inspired watch, and then I've also reviewed the Atowak Tarantula, which is like a skeleton wandering hour piece. The quality of that watch is way more than my Omega Seamaster. Just hands down, that is a better quality watch than my Omega. Now, that is still an expensive watch. It was like $2,000, but you could tell it was an expensive watch. The quality was there. They make some affordable watches too, like $500, and then obviously they make them up to that $3,000 range. And I think if you want that sort of hyper watch, that wandering hour, jump hour sort of pieces, then this is one of the best brands to go about achieving that for the collection. I don't think I can put it in can't go wrong because I think you can go wrong with it if you're not sure that you want that type of watch and you buy one. But it goes without saying that Atowak makes some decent watches. They really are proper decent. Okay, next up we have a brand that you might not have heard of before, and that's Alkin. Now, Alkin is a British watch brand, and a watch brand that I got hands-on with at the British Watchmakers Day just earlier this year. One of the most impressive things about Alkin is that it's run by a guy called Charlie, and he runs the whole brand top to bottom by himself. And if you want like a timeless design dive watch, then these are the ones for you. But don't think minimalism means poor quality, because these watches are super good. If you spend $500 of your money on an Alkin watch, you can't go wrong. Seriously, these watches are that good quality. I've handled them. Fully recommended. Next up we have Bowcroft, again another British watch brand. I reviewed the Bowcroft Seeker on the channel recently, and I fell in love, guys. I really did. Such a beautiful watch. These guys only have 2 watches out right now. They have the Seeker and the Senate. These are 2 dress watches that have a very similar design language. Still completely different watches, by the way. Like, they don't look similar, but that you can tell that they're made by the same brand, which is definitely a compliment to Bowcroft, because they know what they're designing, they have an idea, and they're sticking to it. Again, I've handled both of these models. The quality is definitely there on them, and I think they're absolutely beautiful. If you're looking to spend $500 on a dress watch, I don't think you can actually do much better than a Bowcroft. Seriously, these are some brilliant looking watches, and the quality is definitely there. So they're going in the can't go wrong category. Okay, so next up we have D1 Milano. Now, I won't lie to you, I don't know too much about this brand. I have looked into a few of their models in the past, and I do think some of them look pretty cool. I know they have a very heavy AP Royal Oak influence in the way that they look, and this watch brand definitely needs to evolve out of that if they want to have longevity, because that AP trend isn't going to last for much longer. Even if you go on their website now, it's sort of their main focus point is still doing this AP Royal Oak thing. I mean, I think they do it well, and the prices are good, and the spec sheet looks decent, but the brand is definitely missing something. It has to go in the missing something category. They need to evolve. They need to bring in some new models. You can keep that Royal Oak lookalike in the collection, but we need something else. We need another hero product to show us what you can do. Next up, we have Nezumi. Now, this is a popular micro brand at the minute. Of course, they have their, I think it's the Azeri GMT. Now, the funny thing about this GMT is that it used to feature the Seiko NH34, and it used to be half the price. They've since put the Miyota 9000 inside of it and doubled the price of it. So what used to be like a $250, $300 GMT is now like $600. Now, it's funny because you're pretty much getting the same quality watch as you was getting at $300, except now you're just getting a better movement inside. I think that GMT is a fantastic looking watch, and their chronographs are good looking as well. And I'm absolutely excited to see what they have coming in the future, but I'm not going to let the hype suck me in on making like a poor decision on this one. For me, they make some decent watches. I'm not going to say you can't go wrong, because I need to see more from them before they go any higher. Now, NTH, this is a brand that got requested to feature in this video quite a lot. I asked all of my subscribers on my community tab to give me some suggestions of watch brands that should feature in this video. And yeah, this was one of the ones up there with the most requested. Now, I did have a little look at their catalog earlier, and I'll be honest with you, I wasn't impressed. There is a lot of Omega Seamaster influence in their watches. I also saw a lot of vintage Tudor, modern Tudor influence in their watches. Definitely a lot of Rolex influence in there too, and Zinn. Yeah, I just think that the brand's missing a little bit of originality, and that's probably why I haven't noticed them to this point. Now, I'm sure that these are fantastic watches, but they're not for me. I'm happy to have my mind changed on any of these brands that go in the not for me category, but for right now, what can I do? Okay, next up we have Out of Order, which is another Italian micro brand. Now, these guys do make some cool watches, let me tell you. So the whole idea behind this brand is that they take watches and they make them look like they've aged. So yes, they use things like faux patina, but they also scratch cases and age dials. Yes, it is super gimmicky, but I think they do it in a way that's quite respectable. Like, the watches are beautiful and they do look cool. And I'll be honest, I have thought about picking up a couple of these for my collection in the past. I did handle these in person at Watch Pro last year. I was super impressed with the quality. For me, these are decent watches, especially for the price. I think they're under $500 for what you get. Good specs. It's a good gimmick as well. Definitely a fun watch to have in the collection. Out of Order. Good job. Next up, we have the Pencil, or the Pencil. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. Now, I've come across these a few times in the past, and I'll be honest, I think they make some good looking watches. They obviously have that racing sort of theme going on. They borrow from Tag Heuer and other vintage chronographs. They have a nice use of color. Their watches are super busy, tons of detail. I do think maybe they're a little bit overpriced. I'd like to see them be maybe like 20% less expensive than they are, but tons of detail, good looking watches. I think they're decent, just straight up decent watches. Next up, we have Fairer, and I've got hands on with pretty much every single model from their catalog. the British Watchmakers Day. Yeah, I get the hype with Fairer. I do. Just the beautiful use of colours, the fit and the finish of the watches. They have a watch in pretty much every single category. You know, you've got military inspired, chronographs, complications. They have everything. Another watch brand that is sort of bordering on the side of maybe being a little bit too expensive. But again, if you accept the price of them, I think you are getting an epic watch with Fairer. So for me, Fairer, you simply can't go wrong. Next up, we have SWC, or the Swiss Watch Company. Now, these guys pretty much exclusively focus on creating the best possible field watches. I know these guys are famous for using tons of lume on their field watches. So titanium cases on these, and I think they use grade 5 with like a coating to make them super hard. And this is a micro brand that I do think has the right price on their watches. For the package on offer, I think it's perfect. The designs are there, they're original. For a field watch anyway, I do think they are. I've definitely considered picking up a few from my collection in the past. I think that SWC, you can't go wrong. Okay, next up we have another highly requested watch brand, and that is Henry Archer. Like, this brand has completely flown under my radar. I've never even heard of it before, genuinely. And I don't know if that's just because it has such a boring name like Henry Archer. It's just not a name that grabs your attention, you remember it. But then yeah, looking through their catalogue as well, their watches are just quite boring too. I can see why their watches haven't grabbed my attention. I've probably seen them in the past and just scrolled right past them on Instagram. They look original, and they're clearly not trying to copy anyone with their watches. Again, you could pretty much swap the logo out on the dial for any other watch brand and you just wouldn't even be able to tell. And yeah, looking at their modern catalogue, they're just not for me, just a little bit bland. Okay, next up we have Phoebus. Now, this could be a potential for a must try. We haven't had anyone in the top category yet. This could make it. So I absolutely love Phoebus. I've reviewed 4 of their watches now, I think, and yeah, I've never been disappointed with them. The fit and the finish, the quality, the spec for the cash, everything's there with a Phoebus watch. My favourite was the Eagle Ray. It was a compressor style diver. Just such a stunning watch. And one of my favourite watches I've ever reviewed on the channel was the Phoebus Wavemaster GMT, which is still up there with the very best watches. Way under $500 for the majority of the Phoebus catalogue, like $285, $300 for most of it. And I think for that sort of price, you are getting a seriously good watch. Phoebus is the perfect example of what these Chinese watch brands could be doing if they just focused on making original designs, because Phoebus is a Chinese watch brand that's doing everything right. Original designs, great specs, great prices. Phoebus, must try. Let's do it. Must try. Okay, next up we have RZE. Now, I've definitely noticed these guys in the past. Like, these guys do make some cool looking watches. Also, for the price that these guys ask for some of their models, like, yeah, seriously good value. Again, for me, I just always appreciate when watch brands are using titanium and charging around $500. And especially with RZE, they're using their Ultra Hex coating, which is getting that titanium super strong, right? It's not going to scratch easy. I like the designs. They definitely use good movements, and their watches absolutely seem well proportioned too. I know a lot of my viewers, you guys actually own RZE. I've seen you in the comments and recommended them to me in the past. The Valor chronograph is probably my favorite from the RZE catalog. For $400, I think that is a seriously good watch. But because I've personally not handled one and I've not seen enough from them, I'm only going to put them in decent watches. They're not going to go in can't go wrong, but they're going to go in decent watches. Okay, next up we have Signum Watch Company. Now, I have tried a Signum watch. I've tried the Signum Cuda. The fit and the finish was fantastic, and I know they have a very strong belief in making good value for money watches, and you can definitely see that looking at their catalogue. They're also known for using like precious stones and precious materials for dials. So if you want like a precious style watch for under $500 with like a Miyota 9000 inside, then Signum is one of the only brands I think that you can get that with. So for the price, you can't go wrong with a Signum. Seriously, you can't go wrong. Now, Revolot is a brand that I've actually crushed on quite a few times in the past. They have a watch called the Admiral that I think is just so good looking, and they have a watch called the Gentis, which is obviously very Royal Oak inspired, that I also think is super good looking. Now, I haven't tried either of these watches. I've been offered them from Revolot, and I probably will check them out in the future, specifically the Admiral, but the prices that they're selling these for, like under $300, is insane. Good movements, good designs. I like that they put like their own twist on all of these designs as well. They've got enough originality to them for me. The Gentis was a win. The Admiral was a win. Some of their watches in the past though definitely haven't appealed to me, so I can't put them in can't go wrong. they're just going to go into decent watches. Next up, we have Second Hour. Now, again, this is a watch brand that I've heard of for a long time. It's actually one of the first brands that I came across. Now, I know they make a watch called the Mandela, which has tons of detail on the dial, like pattern work and applied indexes and different finishes and light play, like craziness. And sitting here today, I only know one watch that they do, that Mandela, that's it. I can't in good faith put them in decent watches or can't go wrong because they've not made me care enough about the brand to really dive deeper. So for me, the brand is missing something. You know, give me a reason to care. Give me a reason to look into the brand more. Tell me about the models that you make and why I should care about them, you know? Next up, we have Sternglass. I think this might be the only German micro brand on this list. Now, Sternglass obviously go for that Bauhaus inspiration, very nomos, super minimal, clean, classic wristwatches. I do think they offer watches at a decent price, like they're not stupidly overpriced like some other micro brands. I don't think they have the best reputation in the community for like fit and finish or quality. I tried one in the past and I thought it was cool, and I frequently browsed the Sternglass catalogue. For me, I actually think Sternglass makes some decent watches. I know some people dislike them. I actually think they're pretty good. Next up, we have Gokota, another British micro brand. Now, I've owned a Gokota in the past and I thought it was a good watch, but I looked through the Gokota catalogue earlier and it felt a little bit empty. Like, the watches are good looking and I don't really see anything wrong with them, but I don't know, it was just missing some spice. Like, it was just I just wasn't excited by them. There's this old Gokota model which is like a vintage Explorer with like a glycine Airman and a vintage, just so much influence in this watch, and they don't sell it anymore. I don't know where it's gone. Like, for me, I look at that watch and I'm like, this is a home run. Give me more of this. And then you go onto the Gokota catalog and it's not there. Looking through the modern Gokota catalog, like right now, they're just missing something. They're just missing some spice. Give me something to care about. Next up, we have Wise. Now, these guys have a great reputation, and I've reviewed the Wise Adamascus AD8 and I was very impressed with the watch. I called it like the ultimate affordable Submariner alternative, and boy, was that statement true. 904L steel, Miyota 9000, sapphire crystal, fantastic strap on that watch too, and you can now actually get a bracelet for it. The dial was amazing. It had like this carbon-like effect on it. I mean, yeah, for the price as well, I think they do make some of the best quality dive watches that you can find on the market. I think that if you're willing to spend the $600-700 on a Wise watch, you can't go wrong. Next up is another fan favorite, Formex. Now, I know Formex is the brand that has like the movable cases, right? They move up and down. Again, I think that's super cool. A little bit gimmicky maybe, like what's it actually useful for? Like, I'm wearing my Casio now. It's like super comfortable. It's not got a suspension bridge on it, but it's just comfortable. Now, again, I know a lot of things in watches are gimmicky and that's sort of why we enjoy them, right? But it seems like it's maybe a little bit too gimmicky. Now, I think the Essence is their main watch. $1,500. Now, that's expensive. Like, if you're telling me I'm paying $2,000 for that suspension bridge in the watch, like, I'm sorry, I'm just not that interested. The watches are super good looking. I'm sure they're fantastic quality, but I'm just not into it. I'm not going to put them in not for me because I definitely think they've got room to grow, but at the price, I just would consider pretty much anything else. For me, Formex is definitely missing something. For me, it doesn't appeal to me. I don't know why. Next up, we have Hemel. Now, I know these guys for creating some mechanical chronographs using the ST19 movement. Now, they're going after that pilot watch aesthetic, that vintage pilot's watch. I think it's the Breguet Type 20 look, I think I'm right in saying that. $500 for an ST19 powered chronograph with a somewhat original design. Sapphire crystals. Again, I think the value for money's there. I think they're pretty good looking watches too. I have also considered picking one up for my collection too, so you've got to bring that into consideration. And for me, Hemel, decent watches. Next up, we have Christopher Ward. Now, I wasn't going to include Christopher Ward on this list because for me, they're not even a micro brand. They're a fully fledged independent watchmaker competing with Oris and Nomos and the big brands. I think that Christopher Ward consider Tag Heuer more of a competitor than the likes of Baltic, personally. But then again, they do only sell to customers online, so they are sort of a micro brand in the way that they run their business. And they are a watch brand that appeals heavily to enthusiasts, and that's sort of their main target audience. So it kind of is a micro brand, but it's kind of like the biggest micro brand. Just fantastic watches. I mean, what can we say about Christopher Ward that hasn't already been said? Swiss movements, great fit and finish. The designs, in my opinion, are beautiful. For me, Christopher Ward is a must-try brand. If they're going to be involved in this micro brand tier list, they have to go at the top, don't they? Let's be honest. Next up, we have Smiths. Now, Smiths is a little bit of a letdown brand for me because I know that Smiths has a ridiculously long history. So why the hell did they decide to make a Rolex knockoff? A Smiths watch did climb Everest, right? That is a real story. So why don't we take that Smiths watch that climbed Everest and remake that into a modern watch? Why don't we take that dial design, put it into a nice chunky case, make it a little bit bigger, 20mm lug width, like make it modern, and then release that as a $500 to $600 watch? That thing would sell like hotcakes. Us enthusiasts would eat that shit up for breakfast. But instead, Smiths decide to make a Rolex Explorer knockoff. Now listen, I know a lot of people own their Smiths Everest and they absolutely love it. For me, it's just sort of the pinnacle of what I don't like about like watch collecting. They've done something super cool and then they've just nabbed the Rolex design to make more money. I don't know, I don't like it, I'm sorry. Smiths, not for me, bottom category, sorry, yeah, make something more original. Remake the watch that actually went up to Everest. Make it, please. Next up, we have Aragon, and this is another watch brand that was heavily requested by my viewers. Gotta be honest, didn't know about this watch brand before today, but after looking at their catalogue, I can officially say that their watches are bloody massive. 6.5-inch wrist. You're recommending 50mm watches to me? Come on, guys. The watches actually look really cool. Original designs, they look masculine. I like the use of colours and shapes. The prices are ridiculous. Like, some of these watches are like $200. I mean, come on. I can see the appeal in these watches, absolutely. But they have to go in not for me because of this. Tiny wrist. The 50mm guys. Come on. Next up, we have Suggest, another AliExpress brand. I think if you want a mechanical chronograph and you want to spend about $200, you should take a look at Suggest. I know the Seagull 1963 is a very popular option when it comes to this category, but if you want a design that's slightly different, then Suggest have quite a few of them. I think they do make a Seagull 1963 lookalike, but then they also do a racing-inspired chronograph, and then they have the Breitling inspired chronographs and all the fun colours with them. I haven't really taken much of a look at the other Suggest catalogue. I know they make some like tourbillon watches and some dress watches, which I think look pretty cool too. I have already considered and probably will consider again buying one of the Suggest chronographs for my collection. Suggest absolutely goes into the decent watches category. Next up, we have the Italian Stallions Venezianico. I've been super impressed with Venezianico's watches. Their designs are cool. I like their use of colours. From the two that I've tried, the fit and the finish has been fantastic. The prices are maybe a tad high. Again, it's another brand that could do with maybe being 20% less. The Neride Aventurina that I tried was a seriously good quality watch. Beautiful dial, it fit really well even though it was a big watch on my little wrist. About $1,000 for that watch is expensive, but it's got Swiss movement inside and it looks like it costs a lot of money. For me, I can't possibly put Venezianico in the can't go wrong category because I don't think their catalogue is complete yet, but I think they are very decent watches. Next up, British microbrand Duckworth Prestex. Now, I think Duckworth Prestex do make some beautiful watches. The Centenary is one of my favourite dress watches in recent years. Rectangular tank style dress watch that has genuine history linking back like 100 years. They also do some chronographs and some divers which are very vintage inspired too, but also inspired by vintage watches from the Prestex catalogue and nothing else. Another brand that I think is maybe slightly overpriced for the movements that they use. Like Centenary, I think is a £600 watch and it's got a Swiss quartz caliber. It's okay pricing. I'd like to see it be a little bit less. But in terms of beauty, Duckworth Prestex is there. They make some of the most beautiful watches in my opinion. Because of the price, I won't put them in the can't go wrong category, but they are very much decent watches. Next up, Islander, fellow YouTuber Mark. I've got a lot of respect for Mark. I've got a lot of time for him. He seems like a really good guy. And I actually think Islander as a brand is thoroughly underrated. I think they make some incredible watches. I just think that the Islander catalogue is so diluted. They make so many watches that it's hard to pick out the ones that are actually really good. Their GMT they recently released was incredible. Their Northport dive watch, which I think was an original design. Obviously, I have the Rangemaster Mechanical in my collection that was a collaboration with TGV. That's a fantastic watch. I'd like to see them reduce their lines back to the ones that are like the best sellers or the most popular and really mature those into even better watches. But I think value for money wise, you just can't go wrong with an Islander. I mean, the price that these things come out for as well. Mark really has some of the most competitive pricing on the market. Next up, we have Stratton. Now, if you want a watch that's racing inspired, I can't think of a better brand than Stratton. Super fun, super quirky. The value for money is definitely there. The Special is one of my favorite looking chronographs. I'm actually going to be getting one of those in for review very soon. Stratton's got some new colors out and he's going to be sending me one over. I respect that they have this design language, right? They have this this ethos and they just stick to it. It's like either you like my watches or you don't. I'm not going to follow all of these stupid trends. I'm going to make these cool vintage inspired racing watches. And if you want to like my brand, you can. Like, and I think that's a cool way to approach watchmaking. It's like unapologetically being yourself. And I have a lot of respect for people who go about doing that, you know? Stratton, you simply can't go wrong. If you want a vintage inspired chronograph, check out Stratton, man. Now, the brand that I probably have the biggest soft spot for in the world is Vario. Their whole catalogue, top to bottom, every single watch that they produce, I like the look of. I've personally owned 4 different Vario watches now. I've owned the dress watch, the field watch, the trench watch. Across the board, value for money is definitely there. The quality is definitely there. But for me, more than anything with this brand, it's the designs that just speak to me on a different level. Yes, they're vintage inspired, but Vario absolutely puts their own spin on these designs. I think the trench watch is one of the most beautiful watches on the planet, full stop. Enamel dials, yes, the cases are a little bit weird, but they're good fun. Vario for me is a must-try brand. And I know it's not going to be for everybody, right? I know some people are going to try it and they might not like it, but for me, you have to try it. It's one of my favorite brands, so I have to put them in the top category, right? Next up, we have Zurich. Now, won't lie, don't know too much about this brand. I know they make some funky watches with some funky complications. I think the watches are good fun and value for money looks to be okay. Again, a little bit too wacky and wonderful for me. I think if you want something fun and you like this super quirky futuristic design that they have going on, then at this sort of price range, I don't think there's many other options for that. So I do think they're sort of operating in sort of a little bit of a unique space, right? I think their collaborations with NASA is some of their best work, even though those are massive watches, right? And I wouldn't wear one, not day to day anyway. I might wear one as a statement watch. I think they're simply decent watches. I don't think they're missing anything. I think the brand understands where it is in the market and its target audience, and I respect it. Next up, we have Trasker. Now, I think this is actually going to be a fan favorite. I'll be honest, I haven't had that much experience with them. I've seen a lot of Trasker watches on Instagram, and I think it's one of those brands that looks really good on camera. I don't know if these watches are as good looking in person as they are on the screen. From speaking to my watch reviewer friends, they say these are some seriously beautiful watches in person too. I think the designs of these watches are near perfect. Like, they have some seriously beautiful watches. I'm not going to put them in can't go wrong because I've not tried one yet, but they look like decent watches, and the way everybody talks about them, I think they deserve to be there. Next up, we have Undone. Now, this is a brand that I crush on quite a lot, actually. They have a field watch called like the Terror or something, and it's such a good looking watch. It's like a bit Patek Aquanaughty with the bezel, but then dials field watch and like Flieger. Yeah, I don't know. There's something about that watch. I just like the look of it, you know. This is one of the only watch brands where you can actually customize the watch. Like I believe you can print stuff on the dial and on the case back. You can change the colors of things on the dial, change the hands. Like, there is customization available with this watch brand for a super affordable price. I think under $500 you can do this for. But I think if you want a custom watch and you like the look of their designs, they're decent watches to buy. Okay, next up we have Laurier. Again, I think this is a fan favorite brand out there. I think people have a soft spot for Laurier. I like them. I think Laurier have a great catalogue of watches. I like how they have a DNA and they kind of stick to it throughout their whole catalogue. Now, these are sort of homages, but proper homages, you know. They take inspiration but change things and make it their own. The Neptune is a fan favorite, and I enjoy that watch too. The Zephyr is like a tank style watch, rectangular-ish K-shape. I think Laurier do a good job at being a micro brand. I think they know what they're doing. I have to put Laurier in can't go wrong because you look at their watches and you go, I can't see how I'm not going to enjoy wearing one of these, you know? Next up we have Mr. Jones watches. Without question, if you want to have some fun in your life, right? If you're feeling a little bit down, a little bit depressed, and you know, a cup of coffee just isn't quite kicking in anymore, get yourself a Mr. Jones watch. These watches cost about £200, and they are so much bloody fun. These are hand assembled, and the dials and stuff are handmade down in London in England, and these are designed by real artists. They use mechanical movements, sapphire crystals. I'm personally not a big fan of the case shapes on Mr. Jones, and that's why I don't have loads of them in my collection, because I think the cases are a bit weird. The colour and the humour that these watches deliver, you know, like some of the designs are just so funny. Mr. Jones is a perfect reminder to not take this hobby too seriously, but also do take it seriously because you are getting a fantastic watch for the money. It's simple. You cannot go wrong with a Mr. Jones watch. That's a fact. Okay, so we've got Zelos, Kuo, Baltic, Pagani, Studio Underdog. Let's get through these, shall we? Zelos, right. Zelos is widely known as pretty much the king of microbrands, right? They have been going for a long time. They have a lot of fans. And I reviewed my first Zelos watch just a month ago, I think. The quality is probably the highest that I've ever tried on a microbrand. I think it's fair to say that. The clasp was definitely the best clasp that I've tried on an affordable watch. The dial finish, I think, was the best. Is it the best? I think it is the best. The finishing of the case was up there. It didn't blow me away or anything, but it was good finishing. The design of the watch was incredible though. The shape of the case. I can 100% see why people love this microbrand so much. After trying them myself, I can see why they have so much hype, and I would absolutely recommend people try out Zelos. And I think Zelos is a must-try microbrand. Next up, we have Kuo. Again, another brand that I have a soft spot for because they make sort of quaint, beautiful watches. I've tried the Old Smith and the Royal Smith now, and my god, two great watches. The most recent watch that I reviewed, the Royal Smith, was my favourite of the two. This watch was stunning, beautiful detail on the dial, 3D waffled texture with daggered indexes. Finishing was fantastic. The movement actually fit the watch, like when you flipped it over, it was the same size as the watch. It just felt like a perfectly designed watch. And I do think their prices are a little bit high, especially for those sapphire upgrades. The fact that it costs you like an extra $100 just for a piece of sapphire is a bit ludicrous. Kuo is a can't go wrong. They're not a must try because I do think they are slightly overpriced, but without question some of the most beautiful watches that you can find in the affordable watch market is made in Kyoto. Next up, one of the most popular microbrands on the planet, Baltic from France. But one thing that Baltic just do better than anybody else is A, the marketing, and then B, the structure of the brand. They get the right people talking about their watches at the right time and create this huge wave of hype. They have a good field watch, they have a good dress watch, they have a good racing chronograph, and they seem to evolve these watches too. So they do second, third, fourth iterations of these watches, which I always like to see brands evolving the watches and making them better and building on what was successful and carrying that on. After handling pretty much every model in their catalogue just a couple of weeks ago in France, for the price, I don't think you can go wrong. Pagani design. Oh, here we go. We ready for some serious controversy now, guys? Listen, I understand. I appreciate what Pagani design offers the collecting community. Great specs, good design, insane prices, right? When I first got into collecting, maybe within the first few months, I must admit I did consider picking up a couple of Paganis myself. I mean, how could you not? I mean, $70 for like sapphire and automatic and solid end links milled clasp. I mean, it's like, oh my god, this is that. Why isn't everybody buying these? But then you get to a point where you start to think, okay, I actually want to see something a little bit different, and I appreciate the finer details, and I want something that's a little bit more original. I would absolutely prefer to spend an extra $100 on something like a Mr. Jones and get something that's completely original and artistic. I don't really care about ticking all the boxes and having this watch that's like in theory really good, but in practicality just is a bit boring. Again, just my opinion, Pagani design is just not for me. I can appreciate why people like it, and God bless you, I hope you enjoy your Pagani designs, just not a brand for me. And finally, we have the big dogs, Studio Underdog. I will say I do think Studio Underdog are the real deal. After handling their watches in person, I get it. I get it. They're fun, they're quirky, but it's a serious watch at the same time, you know? I think the price is good, especially for the British assembly that you're getting. The Goofy Panda for me is my favourite watch from the Studio Underdog catalogue. The new Field Watch range I think was a home run, a perfect follow-up to the first series, and I think price-wise they've got it bang on too. I don't think I can put Studio Underdog in must-try because they're very niche in their design language, but for me, if you want a fun watch and you're willing to spend a little bit more, then you can't go wrong with a Studio Underdog. So after switching a couple of the brands around in each category, this is my final tier list. Let me know what you think and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you change? But if you've not yet watched my affordable watch brand tier list with like Seiko and Tissot and all that stuff, then go and check that out. It's a lot shorter than this video, so you'll enjoy it. Go and check it out. I'll see you over there. Bye for now, guys.